FX Audio DAC-M1. And if you look at AliExpress, currently they are having kind of a sale, which is a reduction of price, quite good, I would say, from $219.99 to $131.99. So basically, down from 220 to 132. Very good price. Try to grab it while it is available in AliExpress now at this moment. Okay, let's just have a closer look. What is this FX Audio DAC-M1? As you can see here, it is already in front of me. Okay, already attached. Okay, the hardware itself, let's just talk about the build and the construction itself. This thing is super solid. Okay, just look at that. Constructed of thick aluminum chassis. Okay, and at the back there, you're gonna find very simple interface. Out of the box, for the price that you paid for 132, you're gonna get this power adapter, which is 12 volt, and some output, okay, for RCA out, which is intended for active speakers connection, which is the 2 RCA, left and right. And also, you're gonna get 2 input selection, okay, which is the coaxial cable, and also the optical, and also the most important one being USB Type-C. Okay, so let's just quickly have a look at the front. What else do we have? If you see here, okay, on screen, I have already switched this on, okay, and I will show you later also how does this remote works, which is included, by the way. Operating this FX Audio DAC-M1 is pretty much very straightforward. Okay, I'm just gonna press it like this, and then you're gonna be given several options here. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly go through this. So like I mentioned earlier, it also support USB, okay, coaxial, optical, and also Bluetooth, which I did not mention earlier. Okay, now I'm just gonna switch on to USB. Okay, and let's just have a look at the rest of the configuration here. What else do we have? For the output, what you will have is that, you can choose whether you want a full-time RCA and headphone out, both, okay, active at the same time, or you can choose to have switching between those two, meaning that if you put one active, the other one will not be active, okay, depending on how you switch it, okay? And then the next one, pretty much filter selection. Now, this is quite interesting. It offers 7 layers of filters. And to be honest with you, I have been playing with this for quite a while now, for almost 1 month. I already have this sitting in front of me here like this, okay? And I ended up using F3 the most because I feel that the F3 probably something which I would consider as a slow roll-off filter. It does not mention exactly what, because I might have seen it somewhere. I can't recall where, but it sounded to me like a slow roll-off filter, because what I am hearing is that especially when attached to something which is relatively bright sounding, some of my headphones or IEM, it does offer the kind of, pace and rhythm, a bit more of smoothness to the decay itself. So that is the kind of filter which is pretty much the one I am stuck right now. And it shows on the screen here as FIR3. Okay, let's just have a look again. The next one is pretty much just, usual stuff for the dimmer, the screen dimmer, okay? And then, of course, the last being monitor. Monitor means whether you want it to switch on or off, okay, after a while. For me, I just always click it off, okay? And then, of course, if for whatever reason it is, you can always reset this device to stock setting, okay? Which is, again, like I say, pretty much straightforward. And you can do cancel here, like this, right? So, looking at this device, it is definitely very neat. Okay, if you compare the size with the rest of my device here, let me just show you. Okay, stacked together with the rest of my DAC-M here. All right. Okay, you see that? Okay, so I have here my stack JDS Lab Atom 2 DAC and M, and I also have here my reference, which is my Burson Audio Playmate 2. Okay, running on V7 op amps, and I'm gonna do a bit more of comparison between the 3 of them. And sitting down below here, which is Venture Electronic Megatron, and I also have this semi desktop DAC-M and portable of FIO Q15. Okay, now let's just get back to this DAC-M1. Okay, let's talk about some of the configuration, what's inside. Okay, so in order to do that, let me just show you this. Okay, there's a lot of info here. Obviously, you can read more about it on the website, on the link given below. Okay, it runs on the popular ESS Sabre 9038Q2M single configuration and with XMOS XU208 and the op-amp of TPA 6120A2 plus CSR at 675. Okay, if that information is important to you, it simply means that you can expect this DAC-M1 to be on the upper tier of configuration because ES9038Q2M is a very, very popular DAC, okay, from ESS Sabre. Okay, one of the top range DAC being used even by this Burson Audio Playmat 2 here, okay? And let's just go back to this configuration again. You see here, okay, output option. And this is perhaps the only caveat, which I would say that in this time of day, you're going to find that this M1 comes only in 6.3 headphone output, okay? So which means that it runs on this huge plug here. Let me just show you. Okay. All right. So people who are purely running on desktop DAC-M will be very familiar with this plug because practically every other headphone that you purchase, especially during the era for the last 10 years, would come in that plug sizes, okay? It is intended for desktop usage. And there's no other phone jack that you can find on the body itself, not even 3.5 mm. So you will always need to run on that adapter, okay? And then on top of it, let's just have a look at the other important part, the resolution itself. Okay, the limitation of this M1 is up to DSD64. Okay, not too high because it can only support up to 64, DSD64, but the PCM is pretty much pushed out to the max, okay, which is at 768 kilohertz, okay, and anything from 16 to 32 bit. Okay, just remember this. If you have this DSD higher than 64, you might not be able to use this M1. And then another important part, which is the headphone output power. Okay, the rating for this M1 is pretty much, I would say, quite, moderate, okay, by current standard, because I would even say that, this portable DAC-M like this Q15 here, offering in excess of 1006 milliwatt of power at 32 ohm, okay, and this JDS Lab Atom 2, okay, these two atomic thing, basically offer, right, 2600 over milliwatt of power at 32 ohm, and the best part coming from this Burson Audio Playmat, which runs at over, I think, around 3000 milliwatt of power at 32 ohm. So you can see huge differences between this and the other two, especially, even this one, okay, which is supposed to be a portable DAC-M. But I will talk later about how is the performance of the power itself, because the only thing that really matters is the result, okay? All right, now let's just go back to the setting here, okay, and the configuration. What else is there? All right, let me see. And I did mention earlier, if you notice at the back there, there's an antenna. So you can run, okay, basically, take your phone, connect to this M1 using Bluetooth LDAC connection, which I have tested to be working flawlessly for as long as you don't move too much, because in order to maintain a good LDAC connection, you always need to be somewhere nearby, okay, not too far. Other than that, I do not see any kind of issue, but perhaps I just would like to mention a bit of quirks. Let me just show you this, okay? This remote here, right? You have to be careful with this remote, okay? Don't just simply press it, like a madman or anything like that. Because if you do that, okay, I have noticed that this remote will sometime, okay, fail to connect to the unit itself after I press something wrongly. I don't know exactly what I did was, after that, I need to reset the device here in order to re-establish a connection to this DAC. But other than that, this remote is definitely a blessing, okay? Because why? With this remote, I was able to enjoy my music without the need to reach out, okay, to my DAC-M, because even though I have other few DAC-M here, definitely JDS Lab Atom does not offer any kind of remote. And Burson Audio Playmat 2 does offer remote, but I don't have it, okay, with me, okay? I didn't purchase it. So with this in hand, it is super convenient. Let me just show you this, okay? The arrow here, which seems to be like forward and backward, all right? It is exactly just an arrow. for function to serve like, let me just show you. Okay, when I click on OK, so this button here, we just simply move you through the selection rather than that playback function, because I did try using a media player and some other player devices like Tidal. This doesn't serve as like say forward or backward. So just to set the expectation correct, this only serve as an arrow when in menu mode. Okay, this is the volume. Okay, you can see that. Okay, quite responsive. And the volume itself, by the way, is a step volume, 100 step. Okay, which I find to be quite usable because there's a satisfying click to the volume itself here physically. Okay, which I think is a digital volume, 100 step. Okay, and then we also have here, okay, this one, which is designated as EQ, basically change the filter. Let me do this. See that? The filter change. Okay. Okay, just gonna set it back to 3. And I would say that, you know, I'm quite happy with the button here because for the most part it works, because I don't quite understand what is this. I press this, nothing happened. And this is just the input toggle, okay? Right? Which change, you would notice there, USB and everything, if you need to toggle it remotely, okay? Other than that, pretty much straightforward. Okay, now let's talk about sound and performance. Let's talk about power itself first. Can this DAC-M1 compete with the other two DAC-M which I have here, especially this Burson Audio Playmate 2, or even this JDS Lab Atom 2, okay, when it comes to power, driving these hard-to-drive headphones like this Hi-Fi-Man Sundara here, which is my favorite magnetic planar, and also this Sennheiser HD 600, which is running at 300 ohm. By the way, that this M1 is rated to work perfectly for up to 300 ohm, and this is exactly 300 ohm. So let's just talk about it. You see here, I have taken some notes here, which I'm gonna share to you because earlier I have done some extensive testing, okay, using this, especially the Hi-Fi-Man Sundara, and I would say that, you know, listening to the songs which I am familiar with, this M1, okay, was able to achieve, okay, a similar level of loudness, which was used on Burson Audio Playmate 2. Remember just now, it runs on 3000 milliwatt of power with Class A amplifier on top of it. That Burson Audio needed 30 out of 100, so 30%. And for M1 to match the same loudness level of listening, it needed 58 out of 100. So I need to stretch it all the way to 58%, which is not bad considering that, you know, that M1 only offers 500 milliwatt of power, which suggests that perhaps the voltage is high enough that it does not impact the operation on this Hi-Fi-Man Sundara. Okay, and then let's just talk about the perspective of the sound itself. We already know that, you know, M1 is able to match the volume loudness of this Burson Audio Playmate 2. But how about the sound itself? So let's talk about the sound itself. Okay, and I'm just going to try to make this as concise as possible. Okay, one thing for sure is, does this M1 offer the kind of resolution imaging which I would consider as satisfying? Yes, it is beyond that. Definitely, without a doubt, running on ESS7 9038Q2M, it is highly analytical, okay, clean sounding. At the same time, there's a good balance of being not so, let's say, dry or anything like that, which is normally associated with some ESS saber tuning. And I am talking about, you know, some kind of tuning which you may have heard from topping desktop DAC-M, which tend to be quite sterile, running on the same 9038Q2M, okay, chip. So the good thing is that there's proper balance to the sound itself, okay, the way it presents the energy, the way it presents the transient interchange and everything. I would say that, you know, it is definitely quite comparable to these two here, which is this Burson Audio Playmate 2. Again, let me remind you, also running on ESS7 9038Q2M, both of them using the same DAC inside, okay? The only difference being the amplifier implementation. And also this JDS Lab Atom 2, which also runs on ESS7, but perhaps the older one, I think it could be ES9018 or even 9016, okay? The key thing is that this M1 was able to match the kind of resolution, imaging, okay, and cleanliness and coherency which I observed from this Burson Audio Playmate 2. Okay, but what are the differences? So let's just talk about the differences. We already know that this M1 is good, okay? You can expect clarity, you can expect, coherency, you can expect analytical, macro detail, technical detail. But the difference is that the way it presents the sound itself, the sound frequency, the presentation, as heard, especially when using this Hi-Fi Man Sundara. Okay, I have switched them back to back using these two particular songs, which is this, Diana Krall. Okay, I Remember You, a song that I have listened to millions of times. This song in particular contains millions of tons of details and micro details. Okay, and also The Smiths, my favorite song, which is Reel Around the Fountain. Okay, so let's just talk about the differences between the three of them in particular. Okay, let's just talk about this Burson Audio Playmate 2. Okay, I will admit, okay, I get a bit more of, better resolution and imaging when it comes to the micro detail, okay, of the song, which I shown you earlier when I listen to this Burson Audio Playmate 2, okay? Because what I am hearing is that an articulation. But you have to remember, this Burson Audio Playmate 2 is my reference because what you're going to find inside is a collection of 4, okay? 4, not 1, not 2, but 4 V7 premium op-amp, which is the ultimate op-amp. And I do expect it to be a bit more resolving. But how much resolving it is, the differences between this Burson Audio Playmate 2 and this M1? I would just say that perhaps this is just 10% better. So just take a moment to digest that. Okay, the price for this Burson Audio Playmate 2 is $850 in this current configuration that I am holding, that I'm showing to you right now. And this M1, as I have shown you earlier, the whole package costs only $132 if you buy it now. Okay, and the same can be said when I compare it against JDS Lab Atom 2 and this DAC-M1. I would say that pretty much I am having difficulty trying to separate between the two of them. Which one sounds more resolving or which one sounds more analytical? I would just simply say that both of them are pretty much on par in regard to that. Okay, resolution, imaging, speed, density of sound and everything. Okay, the difference is that being, okay, there's without a doubt, okay, that this JDS Lab Atom 2 being a stack, okay, if you have seen my review, I have openly declared that this JDS Lab Atom 2 amp is the widest sounding, okay, desktop setup which I have listened to so far. And it remains the widest and the most open sounding between all three of them, between any of these that you see in front of me. Okay, so JDS Lab Atom 2 DAC amp remains the champion for soundstage openness and width. Okay, this and this pretty much similar when it comes to soundstage. And I would say that is super impressive. So when we look closer at the sound itself, remember the two songs which I mentioned to you earlier, Diana Krall and The Smith. Okay, I have already mentioned the macro and micro detail, the imaging and the resolution as compared between this and this, okay, using Diana Krall. But when I switch to The Smith, okay, Reel Around the Fountain, the reason that I use that song because it will show me, okay, certain element which is kind of a bit, difficult to detect if I use different other song, okay, because when I listen to The Smith, this Reel Around the Fountain, I observe on the upper mid-range all the way to the treble decay. And this is where I am hearing kind of a bit of differences, okay. I can clearly hear that, especially when using this Sundara here, that this M1 offer kind of a bit more metallic tint to the treble energy, to the treble presentation itself, to the decay, because it does sound kind of a bit metallic or even digital sounding. And without a surprise, I get a bit more of analog, okay, realistic kind of decay coming from this Burson Audio Playmate 2 and also this JDS Lab Atom 2. But then again, is this a bad thing? Let me just put it this way, so that we can have clarity on this issue. Okay, if you are familiar with ESS Sabre, then this is not a surprise, okay? Because the majority of ESS Sabre, especially those tuned on ES9038Q2M, running on, that kind of stock native ESS Sabre kind of tuning, will exhibit that similar kind of sterile, digital sounding upper frequency, especially on the decay. But on a very well tuned, okay, DAC-M like this Burson Audio Playmate 2 or even this JDS Lab Atom, that same upper frequency would sound a bit more natural, meaning that they are akin to the kind of sound which you can expect from AKM tuning. Interesting, right? Okay. However, there's another element which I like to highlight, okay, which is, I think, a very positive thing coming from this M1. The way it presents the mid-range. Where else, okay, while the rest of the sound frequency from the lower frequency, mid-range to upper frequency, the mid-range and the treble relatively remain, okay, linear transparent. I would say that this M1 does exhibit a bit of coloration, okay, just a mild coloration upon, after I scrutinize it back and forth using the different kind of song, it is without a doubt that I would say that this M1 sounded richer. Yes, that's the keyword you are hearing me now. When I compare the three of them, this M1 surprisingly sounded a bit more denser with the sound, especially from the lower mid-range all the way to mid-bass. Okay, so there's an emphasis there on those two regions, which is the lower mid-range to mid-bass. I am hearing a bit more of dense, punch and rumble coming from this M1 as compared to this Burson Audio Playmate 2 or even JDS Lab Atom 2, which means that these two are a bit more transparent when it comes to that sound area. So depending on your preference, if you prefer utmost transparency, then I would say that this M1 might appear a bit colored, okay? But if you want a bit more of denser, richer sound notes, which is similar to AKM sort of sound presentation, this M1 might be the one to go for, okay? Because there's just a bit of hint of coloration there. Other than that, I think pretty much everything else, the three of them are all something which I would consider as value for money. I know, it's kind of a bit, overextending to say that Burson Audio Playmate 2 is value for money because it does, still expensive. But to me, Burson Audio Playmate 2 is still the reference for anything under 1,000 US dollar, okay? This is the pinnacle of under 1,000 US dollar DAC-M. But in general, if I were to compare, okay, between this JDS Lab Atom 2 and also this M1, they are pretty much on par, okay? And you must remember, this JDS Lab Atom 2, each of these costs 129 US dollar and not including shipping from US. So this, in return, would appear definitely a real bargain if you consider that it is an integrated unit, running singular integrated unit, if you can live with the fact that you'll be limited to just 6.3 mm single-ended.